Okay, everybody, I'm Steve Esposito from Knoxville, Tennessee, and I'm here to talk about the layman's version of FOIA and hoops you got to jump through to get information. Before I really get going, if anybody talks on a phone of any kind, cellular or not, we need your permission that we get to record you, because I got yelled at by a judge about that for possibly having a recording that had ambient telephone conversation on it. Wow. So if you object, you can leave. If you accept, you can stay. Okay, so anyway, I'm doing the, and yes, that was a Tennessee court.
Say Kentucky doesn't care. Second party. I have to know I'm recording myself. Whatever gets in it, somebody else's problem.
Oh, that was, I knew I was recording myself, and then there was some question as whether or not a phone conversation was going on in the proximity of the recording device. So anyway, and the world doesn't know if that recording exists. So, anyway, there's the URL to get all the real deep down, fancy pants details about FOIA, all the terminology and all the stuff going on that's involved in it. And it's the current version. I think there's been a couple modifications, but the main version right now is the Freedom of Information Act with a big, giant, long name from 1966, signed by Lyndon Johnson, signed into law by Lyndon Johnson, who also said it was a bad idea, but he signed it anyway. Okay. And this is, the first part of this is just the federal stuff. As everybody's aware, everybody should be aware, the federal government has loads and loads and loads of information. And some of it's Information that they ought to have, and then some of it's information that they have. Now they publish a lot of this information. So rather than going the FOIA route, you can go to vault.fbi.org if you're looking for FBI information. If you're looking for EPA information, you can go to the EPA website. The search engines are your friend. Those pick up a lot of that stuff. Another really good source that I ran across that doesn't get enough publicity is archive.org. Now archive.gov is the federal archives. You can search that too, but archive.org was where I found personnel files from FBI agents who, on the project I'm working on, is a guy named Dr. Ronald Kaufman, who planted a bunch of time bombs in bank safe deposit boxes in 1971. The guy who got credit for finding him or identifying him got a $200 bonus in 1972. And then I also talked to the guy who, now he's deceased, that's why his personnel file was on, or what could be gotten by somebody else's FOIA request was on archive.org. Then later I spoke to the FBI agent who really identified him, and he didn't get a bonus, and he was surprised that the boss of the investigation got a bonus. So anyway, there's a whole bunch of avenues to go that are free, and this one typically is not. You got some limitations here too. The guy I'm writing about, when I first started working on this book project, he was still alive. If you request the FBI file of somebody, whether it exists or not, of somebody in this room who's still kicking, they're not giving it to you. They're, unless they give you permission to get their file. And then you're going to pay the same thing. Saves money if you do it for a journalistic purpose. I failed to, on one of my requests, do journalistic purpose, and you'll see the results of that here in a minute. Again, checking to see if the information's already public, and that's archive.org over there, and the vault. If it's FBI information, the vault, fbi.gov. There's no single FOIA format, application, or process for all the federal agencies. You have to go to that agency that you're seeking information from and request it through their system, which I don't know if there's a great, well, the good side on that is you're asking the information that's archiving, or you're asking for information that's archived by that agency, and that's going to make it easier for them to find. They're going to be the agency who is most likely to know where that information is, if they're going to give it to you. And something that helped me out a lot was public information that gives you clues of what to ask for to search deeper. My bomber had sent over a dozen 4-page handwritten letters to journalists all across the United States. And when some of the newspaper reports and magazine reports listed some of the people who received those that correspondence. Also, court records, they'll come up in a minute, but they redact those less than the federal agencies do. You've got to essentially ask the judge to seal something, close something off, whatever. And if that's not, and if the judge doesn't agree, then it's open. And if nobody asks, then it's open. But, excuse me. Anyway, Walter Cronkite's FBI file is at the vault. And in Walter Cronkite's FBI file, a list of the bomb components that this guy used from a I forgot if it was the bomb that detonated or one of the multiple bombs that they found. He told them where they were. I don't recall which one it was, but they had a list of the components. It was, in a way, kind of garbled, so I had to do some consulting with, or querying with other people. One of the detonator he used to set off these bombs. The explosive was Hercules red dot shotgun powder that you used to be able to just buy in a hardware store. Used to be able to buy it in a sporting goods store, but sporting goods stores are getting a little thin these days. Anyway, his detonators were Sylvania blue dot light bulbs, or flash bulbs. It's from old school flash bulbs. Well, there happens to be a collector community of flash bulbs online. So I asked the guy who runs it, what do you think this really is? Because the model that was in the FBI file doesn't exist. And then we went back and forth, and I finally figured out which one I thought it was, and then I saw some on eBay and I bought them. So, and then other components, old-time battery charger. If anybody remembers the old battery chargers from the 1970s, they're big old brick-looking things. That's what he used for the case for his bombs. Found one of those on eBay. There's a Mallory battery charger, I think. Anyway, original box, all that. So I have some props when I do the documentary, if I ever figure out how to do those right. Anyway, back to Walter Cronkite's FBI file. had the bomb component information in it. I wanted to find out other information. I looked, David Brinkley was an individual who did not have his, he was at that time deceased already, and he didn't have a file at the vault, so I requested that and got it, and didn't have anything in it, what I was looking for. What it did have was the FBI told his bosses to get him to shut up about wiretapping recorders in the 1940s when he was on the radio. And I hadn't seen that written anywhere, so I made a blog post about it, and as far as I can tell, nobody else has bothered to use that in any capacity. But anyway, found out some other neat information about him, which is fine if I were a professional writer. I'm not a professional writer. I'm a environmental specialist with a county government. I'm just doing this as a hobby. So anyway, back to find out which agency it is. For example, if you're looking for something environmental, start with EPA and look at news articles in case there's anything related to it. There's a weird phenomenon in the news that stories get recycled, and every time they come back out, it's as if it's never been written about before. At least that's the way it's portrayed in the paper, which is not true. And anybody remember the story about Carl Sagan working on a experiment to detonate a nuclear bomb on the moon? You'll see it again in 5 years, just as if nobody has ever written about it 20 years ago, 4 years ago, or in 5 years it'll be out there again. And then it's easy enough to find. Do Carl Sagan moon atomic bomb, and you'll find the history. It goes back, back to I guess the 90s. And it was an experiment that was never done. It was just it was either an important experiment that they couldn't get approval for, or a bunch of guys in California were trying to get funding for something. That's pretty much the way those shake out. Anyway, again, each agency has their own process for doing this stuff. So if you take the FBI format and try to send it to even DOJ, which is their boss, I'm not sure if that's really gonna help get it done any quicker for you. Or taking the FBI format and sending it to the National Transportation Safety Bureau. I'm not, all the information's there, but the bureaucrat who's looking at it is expecting it in a certain order and in a certain manner. So just go to NTSB and look up what their process is for FOIA. And simple, DuckDuckGo or whatever you use, and do NTSB FOIA, and boom, you're there. This is the FBI form. I apologize that you can't read it, but I could have left all this jive off of it and had it bigger, but they essentially, they give you the sample letter. That's the URL for that sample letter. And if you follow it, you might not get the results you want. You're going to get the best results that you can expect at that juncture. Once you sent it in, this is what's going to happen. You should get a letter informing you that your request is being processed. I usually get those letters, and I've done more than one of these. However, the follow-up letter, sometimes I have not received. Now, I don't know if that was failure to send it. I doubt it, because the person I spoke to in West Virginia at their archive had a whatever message ID or whatever that had a date that it was sent out. I'm suspecting that it was probably at my end, either at somewhere along the post office process, or somebody delivered to the wrong house or whatever. Mine was giant. Well, giant for me. I mean, if I was, what's a big Nashville paper? Anybody?
Banner.
If I was the Nashville Banner, $880 would be. Oh, okay, go ahead.
Right.
Me, now that's half a mortgage payment, and I half the time don't know where the other half's coming from. So it's important. There's a writer, I'm going to butcher his name, Brendan Corner. He wrote a book called The Skies Belong to Us. It's about hijacking stuff going on in the same era that I'm writing about, 1970s-ish, except he has a whole bunch of other history around the one particular hijacking and couple that he's writing about. Really highly recommend that book. And if you email him and ask him nice, he'll tell you how to mail the book jacket to him, so he'll autograph it and send it back to you. So, which is what I did with mine. And anyway, we developed a rapport, and he told me to check with a FOIA consultant. Apparently there's FOIA consultants out there to help me narrow down my search so it won't take as long. I was like, well, FOIA consultant sounds like money. I've got time, I don't have money, so I'm just going to have to wait a while, and I am. I'm still waiting. It was before the last con here was when I received all this information, or received my potential bill, and so I went out and did a GoFundMe and raised, in GoFundMe donated dollars is over $500, pretty quick. And people from this conference donated to that, which was great. And the part I get to keep is still sitting in an account because they haven't given me back they haven't replied back to me what I'm getting. And actually, as it says on near the bottom there, when I talked to the FBI person myself at their archives in West Virginia, she determined that there was a whole set of the files that were probably duplicates of another set of the files, and we got that knocked down to under $200, which still not chicken feed to me, but then the rest of that money is still going into the book project and all that. And I'm still waiting for response from the FBI on that. Just like everybody told me, it's going to take a while. So, and I've heard they're kind of busy with some other stuff right now. So here's other stuff so that's FOIA stuff. Does anybody have any questions about federal FOIA specific stuff? That's just like anything or if anybody's tried to, you had a different experience than me. Okay. This is other stuff for just general research on something that, that anything you're trying to research. It doesn't have to be a book about a 70s Yippee Bank, or Yuppie Bank, correction, Yippee Bank Bob. Let's see, courts. This guy was indicted in 3 different federal court districts because he set bombs in New York, Chicago, and San Francisco. I guess I didn't mention New York because I had 0 with that federal court district. I did not have any luck even starting with them. I started with Chicago because that's where he was living at the time. Sort of. He'd lived there for a little while, and then he moved out west. And he seemed to go back and forth between Chicago and out west. And that was, speaking to their staff was a difficult, really difficult process. And one of those bullet points there, I couldn't convince the clerk that these judges were no longer on the bench, alive or not. I was asking for information from 1968, where, let's see, for the 68 Democrat Convention, he and Abby Hoffman and all these other guys were involved in a whole bunch of court action, and it ended up being federal court action. All kinds of information there that I still don't have all I have is news reports about what allegedly went on there. Then 1972, when he was indicted in Chicago, New York, and San Francisco. So anyway, and we called Chicago. It's like, and Judge Hoffman was the judge who was hearing the case against Abby Hoffman and some other guys, and the guy I'm writing about was one of Abby Hoffman's friends, so he's intertwined in all this Abby Hoffman action. So I'm telling this clerk about this, and he says, I've never heard of that judge. I said, well, the case was in 1972, 73. No, I take that back. One of the cases was in 1969, and I just got nowhere with that. San Francisco, on the other hand, was and it happily surprised me. They were the way that accident occurred was I emailed the contact that they gave on their website, and it bounced. So I found the boss and her and her email address. She assigned my case to, or my inquiry to one of their court people who was just absolutely fabulous. Anything I needed, every place where records for this case were, he found out where they were, and I ended up talking to an archivist in Kansas City, I think, who was just nice as you can be, and they found everything they found more stuff than I thought I was looking for, which was great. And that's where I found out where the one bomb that my guy detonated, or allowed to detonate, and it was on the timers went out to 7 months, but it detonated. Everybody reported that it was an accidental detonation. His court records, he admitted it was an intentional detonation. It was an intentional detonation on Labor Day weekend, where nobody should have been in the bank, but it was intentional nonetheless. So anyway, that's nice. I got a piece of information going into my book that other people didn't have, which doesn't really help if it's a topic nobody's interested in reading, but I'm still going to get it done one of these days. And what else? Other stuff. Every level of government, as far as I know, every jurisdiction anywhere in the United States has some kind of public records accessibility. Now, my agency that I work for in Knox County doesn't know that I'm giving this talk, but just in general, just to tell, just citizens in general, if you want, in Tennessee, if you want records from an agency, you go down to that agency and you fill out a public records request. They're going to charge you for copying, and they're charging rates for copying that haven't been real copying rates since the 1980s, I guess. It's like 15 cents a page or something. I've also noticed that the courts vary from county to county how much they're charging you for information. I've picked up court information from Blount County, which is out next door to Knox County, and it was, I forgot if it was more expensive or less expensive than Knox County. Yes?
Depending on the particular office and the type of records that you're looking at,
Right.
some of them will let you bring in your own camera and photograph them yourself at no cost.
Knox County just started doing that for some things. So, but not the courts yet in Knox County. Knox County, you got a criminal court or civil court. No, I'll stick with criminal court because that's where I've actually had to pick stuff up. And they will, it's $2 a page, I think, except the page is double-sided, and that'll give you the 4 pages, it's double-sided, 4 pages of court information that applies to, that's the set of forms they fill out for every case, and the judge says why the case was disposed of, in what manner it was disposed of, and all that, and what was charged, what evidence was. It's kind of like if somebody was stopped and they had contraband on them, it will say in the document that they consented to search, and and that's sworn information. Anyway, that's what you get in Knox County. You go over to Blount County, I forgot. Well, I know the price is different. I don't remember if it's any cheaper or more expensive. And I'm sure Anderson County, I just emailed them and asked them, and they said, oh, sure, here you go. They emailed me scanned documents back and no charge.
It varies a lot.
Right. So that's inside Tennessee. So that's, okay. So that's it on the meat of what I was going to talk about. Does anybody have additional experience or information on this sort of thing?
I just wanted to say, to ask about photocopying, taking pictures of your own records, because they won't bring that up and tell you usually
okay.
that you can do that. But if you ask them, the worst they can do is say no.
Correct. My experience in Knox County with both the civil court and the criminal court, you ask them, neither of the courts there let you take any pictures of anything. And you might get a big giant court file, and some of the stuff, if there's judge's notes in there, they will not let you copy it. You can take notes about it. You can say, yeah, the judge said this, page 3 of the handwritten notes, blah, blah, blah. But they will not let you have a copy of it, and they won't copy it for you. And I don't know if it's both parties in a civil case, but if you're the plaintiff in a civil case, they will copy for free in Knox County. If you're the plaintiff, they'll copy for free all the stuff that they're allowed to give you. you don't get charged for that. I don't know what the defendant gets on, what their deal is on that, but then there's a whole other side of the file that you're not getting a copy of unless the judge orders you to be able to get a copy of that. Also over on the federal side of it, I've sat here and I don't know if anybody's been, watching a lot of the congressional stuff, just committees going on. Congress can ask the FBI for documentation that exists, that they're privy to, and that agency, other agencies too, just decides they're not giving it to them. They don't. And how, now when I was studying, when I was a fiscal manager with in defense, it's my understanding that you pull something like that, they're not messing with the president, they're not messing with a secretary or an undersecretary. They're going to the manager of that department, they're going to put him in jail. That's, then except one of my relatives is a lawyer now, and he took federal fiscal law. He's a lawyer with one of the many departments of the federal government, and he told me on misappropriations and things like that, where they go straight to the contracting officer and they can seize all of his assets to give the government back its money that he wasn't supposed to give away, and they can put him in jail. They don't do that, they just fire him now. So that was the latest iteration of that I heard. I know when I was in fiscal law class, it was really drummed into us that, and I was just a contractor, it's really drummed into us that you sign for something that you are signing for it too, in addition to the federal government. So anyway.
That's the way it should be.
Should be, but apparently it's not. Last iteration I heard not being done quite that way. Okay, anybody else have anything else? Oh, come on, you've been very interested.
Okay, here's a question.
Okay.
On what grounds can a FOIA request be denied, and how much detail will they give you about that denial?
I thought I had that on a slide. National security is a big one. If your request, and that I was not directly involved in this FOIA request. I was indirectly involved in, well, as several FOIA requests. When I worked at Headquarters Department of the Army, get stuff with it's called the snowflake. A request comes in at the top of the Pentagon, and it gets down, floats down, and lands on somebody's desk. And I knew some of these people who'd received them. They'd reach out to everybody in the department and say, hey, look at this and see if you see any problems with releasing the information. And now, one instance was a manual. Well, that manual had all kinds of information that you would not want a threat to have about how the Army trains people to do things out in the field. So that was denied. And what was weird about it, it was a magazine that you wouldn't necessarily think would be writing an article like that, but they were. And I never went and saw if they wrote an article and said the Army wouldn't tell us what was in this book or whatever. I also didn't look to see if they found a public available copy of the book, and that's another one of those things. What you're looking for might be publicly available, but that doesn't really matter that much. For example, people would ask me things when I was a soldier, and I'd say, oh, I don't know. And which was my answer, was I don't know, whether I knew or not. And I'd say, well, you know, I can find that out. And I said, well, go ahead and find it out, but you're not going to find it out from me. But I mean, that's really rare kind of things. If you want to know what kind of guns on an M1 tank, it's a 120 smoothbore, 120 millimeter smoothbore. They start out with 105 rifled, just like an M60 tank. I don't know if it's the same barrel. I know the breech was different breech, but anyway, stuff like that, that's, you know, big deal. But you're right. When you're asking information now, what information the National Transportation Safety Board would have that needs to be secret, that might hurt somebody if it was released, I don't know. But they can do the same thing. And I do know that just because it's classified, it has a classification label on it, does not just automatically stop the request. If you've got a document about how many sides are on the Pentagon and it has a secret stamp on it, then somebody with the authority to declassify that needs to declassify it and supply it to whoever requested it. That's now, I've never heard of that instance in reality, but I'm sure it's happened in reality. If somebody is, I think I mentioned this before, if somebody's alive, you're not getting, like, for example, my guy, when he was still alive, unfortunately, he died December 2014 or 15, and I was actually kind of sad about that, because his bombing stuff appeared to be about the only bad thing the guy ever did in his life. It was an incredibly stupid thing, but it, and it's bad, but the rest of the time he lived his life as very, very honorable, good guy. But while he was alive, the only way that the FBI would give me any documentation, if I asked for it with his name on it, the only time that they would give me information is if I had a release from him. And they have a form for that. They've got a specific format that if you want to give a reporter or somebody permission to go get your FBI file, they can. And, you know, they'll pay for it and whatever. Excuse me. I was trying to think something along those lines. Oh, an example about how to kind of get around that a little bit was I read in a newspaper article that J. Edgar Hoover had written an essay that mentioned him in it. And it was real close to the end of J. Edgar Hoover's life. He died in 1972. This guy was caught in February 1972, and later J. Edgar Hoover died in 1972. And so I requested from the FBI just blanket all of J. Edgar Hoover's essays, speeches, and public statements from January 1st, 1972 until the end of it. I went past his death because it could have been published later. And I got a little bit of something there. The place that really helped was the University of Tennessee Law Library, because he mentioned this in an article for a legal publication, for some kind of legal journal. And he mentioned Ronald Kaufman in there. And so I checked with the law school. I said, how much does it cost to get this? And they said, see if we can find it. And then the next thing I know, They sent me a PDF, is in my inbox, and no charge, no problem. What, you live in Knox County? Okay, good. And by the way, University of Tennessee Law School is the home of one of my favorite bloggers, Glenn Reynolds. So if you get a chance to look at Instapundit, he's a University of Tennessee law professor, and he taught one of my relatives who's fond of him also. I guess in person he's as good as he is on paper or on electrons. Other reasons why, well, they're not going to deny your request if they just don't have the information. But they don't have the information, so you're not going to get anything out of your request. They will tell you that they didn't find anything. Now, whether, I don't know the nuances on whether they're telling you they didn't find anything or they've, there's a big long list. That's back to looking this stuff, looking up the fancy stuff online. There's a whole world of codes and acronyms for why your request is being denied. They will, let's see, other agencies are in control of the information, so they have to be checked with, let's see, and there are a bunch of them, but they kind of shake out to, we don't control this information, or other organizations have input into, or they have a vote into whether this is releasable or not. Then it's, okay, is this releasable? Okay, do you got somebody who's alive in there? Or is it about somebody who's alive? Because they just being alive, they can be redacted if you're, you know, which they didn't do when I received some stuff. Actually, my bomber I got his Social Security number. They published that in newspapers back then, 1972. The past addresses and stuff, that was in court records, that was in newspaper articles. Newspaper articles, this might come as a shock to people, but they're not always accurate. Let's see, completely different issue, or different area. When you get court records, even though the court's supposed to redact stuff, they don't always redact it real good. I'm talking about physical paper documents where they take a Sharpie and go across the Social Security number or the driver's license number of an individual and then hold it up to the light and read it. Oh yeah, now in Adobe Acrobat, which is a lot of the electronic information is released, was put together through on Adobe. There's all kinds of stories out there about the released file wasn't locked down right, and so it's, you could with a full version you can go in and turn off layers and read whatever they redacted sometimes. When I was a defense contractor, some of the neat thing about being a smoker, if the vice presidents of your company smoke too, you get to talk to them like regular folks. And one of them was going through a bunch of redactions for some kind of release, and I informed him of that issue with Adobe Acrobat, and he asked me, how you fix that? I said, the way you fix it is you do your redactions, you print the document, and then you make a photocopy of that print, and then you give it to them, because then you can't read any of the stuff that they're not supposed to read. It doesn't exist. That's the thing. That way, what you're not supposed to be giving other people does not exist in that document. So I'm sure there's somebody going to come up with a way to undo all that. I don't know if you can, but if there's a way, somebody maybe in this room might. Let's see.
There's ways. Sometimes you can bring that stuff up in GIMP, for instance.
Yeah.
And
I use GIMP a lot.
You bring up the color, the color edit box.
Right.
And you select the redaction, and then you start messing with the contrast and the gamma and stuff.
Oh.
And the next thing you know, you can kind of see an outline of some of the stuff that's underneath. You can bring it out sometimes.
First place to go for that is low-pass filter. Try the low-pass filter, and you can mess with the contrast and brightness on it.
Yeah.
And it's also a tool used for sharpening images, but yeah, the low-pass filter, okay. I did not know. Well, I should have. I guess I would have known if I would have thought about it longer. So, trying to think other reasons why they. Well, like if they just don't have the information, they're going to write you back and they're going to give you all the little reasons. Or they might not have the information, but it's information you're not supposed to have anyway. So they might have another reason on there why you're not getting any information from them, but they're not telling you that they just don't have it anyhow. So, yes.
This seems really obvious, but I was listening to a talk at DEF CON about FOIA, and this it seems obvious that
They have all the lawyer people and stuff. I'm not lawyer people, so go ahead.
But he was talking about he would submit FOIA requests about his FOIA requests to get information about why he's denied.
Oh, that's neat.
Yeah, and he has some really interesting information from that I thought was very brilliant.
Well, so far, I haven't run into a problem needing to go to that level. So far, it's like either, okay, this guy's still alive, we're not telling you. And then the other is, well, we've got so much of this information, how much do you really want? Unless you want to pay $1,000, almost $1,000 for it. So that's been my experience, but yes.
Do you know if holding TS or TSCI aids in FOIA requests or maybe hampers?
I don't know if that aids in a FOIA request or not. It aids in you going to jail if you talk about stuff you're not supposed to talk about. Because, you know, you've got that clearance. You're supposed to be a trusted individual, right? But if you have the clearance and you're doing it on behalf of your own agency, I don't know if that, well.
I'm thinking if, like, for instance, if someone who did hold clearance did find specific information that they'd like released.
Oh, well, now internally, they have a whole release process. For if you're an action officer, whether you're a contractor or a federal employee, and there's stuff you think is no longer sensitive information, there's a process to go through that because, for example, if you're one of these big shots with the TS clearance, when I was doing that work, and it's public, your clearance is public information. I was just secret. That's it. I was secret. Headquarters, Department of the Army, sitting in a seat that could have easily been filled by a major or lieutenant colonel. I was a contractor. In the reserves, I was a major. I don't get to look at the TS stuff. But if I'm working on a project that requires stuff that's classified as TS, might try to get somebody to look at it and say, is this really, really TS stuff? Because if it really is, I don't want to see it. If it's not, I need it to do the IT portfolio for whatever, or help. I was a budget guy, so it's rare that I had to mess with. I never had to request anything be declassified or it's classification reduced. Or maybe there were times I had to, but I didn't know it, so I never tried it. I'll put it that way. I never tried it. And I never had the occasion to think I needed to try it. So, but then I'm also, I think it'd be cool to be a real world pen tester, like those guys who show up at DEF CON and, you know, go through the doors and stuff. That would be fun. But then when I worked at HQDA, I had to do anything. If it crossed my mind, I kicked it out of my mind. I saw stuff that was like, if I saw an area that I'm not supposed to be in, I didn't try to go in. I just kept going, you know. So, because, you know, for that, the only thing you can get is in trouble if you do it. Now, these days, if I was hired to check that, or back when I was in charge of cavalry scouts, well, that was our job, and I would do stuff like that. So, anyway, do you have something? Do you have something?
Just, I was an IASO for the
Oh, okay.
Army Corps of Engineers. So
Oh, okay.
It was 2007, 2008.
Okay.
I'm familiar with what you're talking about.
Yeah. It's like, that ain't none of my business. I don't want to know about it. And then there's like all kinds of people who want to tell you stuff. It's like, no, I don't need to know about that.
Like
I've
people
used-
with cameras at Fort Knox that raise it up to take a picture of the vault.
Oh,
The
neat.
MPs come around.
See, I used to be stationed at Knox, and the first thing they told us is, then, that was back, I had training at Knox. Well, I used to go fly the simulator there too. But
Black Hawk.
no, I'm old. I was Huey simulator.
Awesome.
And no, they would, I'd tell you, as soon as you got there for anything, AIT, basic officer course, whatever, advanced course, I didn't do advanced course there. Stay away from the gold vault. We have no mission at the gold vault. Leave the gold vault alone. Don't go trying to get into the gold vault. Don't go knock on the door and see if they'll let you into the gold vault. Just stay away from the gold vault. If you don't have any business using the gate near the gold vault, use a different gate. Use the gate that's closest to where you're going. And that was like,
They told you that was gold paint on all those lead bars?
none of my business what's in the gold vault. I was told that it was none of my business what's in the gold vault. And I saw and I was around the time of all this stuff I'm writing about, they did an audit of the gold vault. And because apparently some reporter asked if there was any real gold in the gold vault, so then they brought all the reporters in to show them gold in the gold vault. And it was on camera and everything. It
That was
pretty
when they
neat.
had to actually paint those lead bars.
Well, see, there you go. And then on the History Channel, there is some little half-hour or one-hour show about the gold vault that they keep recycling all the footage and everybody in, and I think they've done it about 3 times, 3 different versions of it, with some guy who's a reporter for the Louisville television station, and which I don't know, he's probably retired by now, because the last time I saw it was probably 10 years ago, I don't know. Anyway, okay, any other cool, groovy stuff you want to know about? I mean, is there any stuff about what I've been talking about you want to know? Because all these other guys are doing the cool, groovy stuff. Russ, but I caught you. Go ahead. It's just like an auction. You just purchased a question. Okay. All right, that's all I got. Thank you again for...